The right POV on poverty, a capabilities-based approach. Brought to you by Jackson Roberts and Trisha Bravi. In 1904, academia referred to poverty in the following way. Whether it be directly through starvation or indirectly through sickness brought on by insufficient nourishment, poverty must necessarily lead to the extinction of the physical life. Clearly, this definition of poverty misses many of the key points regarding poverty in the United States, and many would agree that it should and has been amended. Now, we would say that only those in the most extreme poverty have their existence threatened on a daily basis, not everyone living in poverty. By the 1960s, we had updated our measurement of poverty to include certain thresholds the individual must meet to be considered out of poverty, a threshold more commonly known as the poverty line. Such a measurement of poverty, one that utilizes thresholds and income as the chief tools of measurement, is referred to as an absolute measurement system.
In contrast to these definitions, we would define poverty as the lacking of sufficient capabilities that allow one to function as a full member of society. This includes inability to function due to income inadequacy and social, economic, or political factors that prevent one from expressing their capabilities. Furthermore, we argue that the current system for measuring poverty does not adequately fit our definition of measurement and instead advocate a system of measurement that utilizes the Supplemental Poverty Measure and Human Development Index. We will turn next to a description and eventual refutation of the official poverty measure, which is the U.S.'s current system of measuring poverty. The official poverty measure, or OPM, relies on a formula developed in the mid-20th century that takes a family's estimated food expenditures and multiplies it by 3 to find the necessary family resources to remain above the poverty line. In measuring household resources, the OPM takes into account family income and cash benefits, which include unemployment benefits, Social Security, and other similar benefits. The OPM measures resources by family, not household, meaning unmarried couples living together are not considered to be sharing resources even if that is the case.
The outcome of utilizing the OPM is a determination of income lowness, that is, a family not having enough income to meet a threshold. However, income lowness is simply not sufficient for understanding and measuring poverty in the U.S. The proper approach to measuring and defining poverty includes the application of capabilities and income inadequacy. Capabilities, according to Amartya Sen, are combinations of doings and beings and refer somewhat to the freedoms an individual has within society to make choices or take actions. Defining poverty within the context of capabilities brings us closer to examining well-being, both in terms of our actual actions and our ability to choose or not choose well-being. The actual expression of a capability is referred to as a functioning, which are the things one manages to do or be during the course of leading a life. The key distinction between the terms capability and functioning is that a capability refers to the ability to choose, whereas the functioning carries that choice to its terminus in the form of an action or decision. An example that illustrates this distinction, presented by Martha Nussbaum, is the difference between someone who chooses to fast and someone who starves due to lack of food. Even though both individuals have the same functioning, to go without food, only the faster has the capability to choose between eating and not eating. There are also people who have capabilities but are limited in their action due to political and socioeconomic issues. These circumstances can come in the form of rights or liberties that an individual lacks access to due to their background and current position in society. A basic example of someone with an ability limited by an external choice complex of societal and political pressures would be someone who has been granted the right to vote, meaning they are a citizen of voting age in the U.S., but cannot vote due to geographic location, lack of education on the voting process, or other barriers that can prevent access.
It is best to view capabilities within the focus of human dignity. We would say that poverty does not refer to the inability to reach a threshold, but rather a loss of human dignity through the deprivation of capabilities, which may be caused by income inadequacy but not necessarily income lowness. Someone who is in poverty could be said to have an inability to pursue his or her well-being as a result of a lack of economic means and the surrounding social and political circumstances. This contrasts with the idea that many present that poverty is simply economic deprivation and can be solved through reallocation of resources. One might then ask themselves, why would someone want to measure poverty through the lens of capabilities? Many would argue that poverty should be defined simply in terms of income and may believe that absolute standard of living with regard to basic necessities is really the best measure of poverty. We respond to this argument with the assertion that such an ideology disregards the level of social exclusion many of those not currently designated as living in poverty experience as a result of a relatively, not absolute, low standard of living. Thus, even people who fulfill their basic needs may be considered as living in poverty if they are not capable of participating fully in society. Social exclusion, as we define it, is the inability to feel a part of one's larger culture due to the lack of sufficient resources and capabilities to participate in standard societal practices, such as possessing a car or time for leisurely activities.
The OPM is simply not the measurement system sufficient for accomplishing this task. The shortcomings of the OPM in terms of effectively demonstrating the presence and degree of poverty are many. Chiefly, the primary measurement tool, taking an average food consumption and multiplying it by 3, is itself faulty because although it has been adjusted for inflation, it has not been adjusted for standard of living. The OPM accounts for food as 1/3 of a family's budget when today it makes up just 1/6 of the budget. Furthermore, the OPM does not account for geographic variation in cost of living nor medical out-of-pocket expenses, also known as MOOP. The system we turn to define poverty in terms of capabilities and thus human dignity utilizes the Supplementary Poverty Measure (SPM) and Human Development Index (HDI), which combined serve to provide a more holistic image of poverty in the U.S. We'll first examine the SPM with regard to the OPM. The SPM resolves many of the statistical issues raised by the OPM. Some of the key improvements of the SPM include adjustment for geographic variation, accounting for MOOP, the definition of the resource unit as a household rather than the family, and the measurement of in-kind and near-cash benefits in addition to cash benefits. Of extreme import is the inclusion of MOOP in the measurement of poverty, especially for those of age 65 or older, who are demonstrated to have a 7.3% higher incidence of poverty when medical costs were taken into account. Thus, the SPM presents a quasi-relative approach to defining poverty due to the fact that it measures poverty within the context of basic needs as well as a larger social context and possibility of social exclusion. The SPM thus presents an objective baseline from which we can launch further investigation into access to capabilities. To turn to the seemingly more subjective and difficult to quantify aspects of achieving certain capabilities, we may use a Human Development Index to identify the overall state of well-being of the individual. This system of measurement rests upon the concept of capabilities and refers to well-being as defined by real and actual opportunities to undertake actions that allow them to be whom they would like to be. The American measurement of HDI rests on the degree to which individuals have access to a long and healthy life, measured by average life expectancy at birth, access to knowledge, measured by school enrollment for those above the age of 3 and educational attainment for those above the age of 25, and a decent standard of living, measured in relation to median personal earnings, which might be said to be among the most basic of capabilities, as well as enabling of other capabilities. As a whole, utilization of the HDI provides a clearer picture of the actual opportunities available to the individual, which brings us closer to identifying capabilities of these individuals.
The combined SPM and HDI method of measurement is not perfect, but does bring us closer to understanding the issue of poverty. Neither manages to solve the issue of determining the depth or degree of poverty, and both require the amassment of large amounts of data requiring a large task force. Furthermore, measurement from a capabilities viewpoint can still seem to many to be too subjective, so it may be an unappealing method to the public. However, we ought to take what Amartya Sen refers to as a descriptive view of poverty, meaning we should seek to define poverty as best as we can and allow actual policy to follow it. These methods bring us closer to a better understanding of the issue, which in turn will allow the public and the government to take steps to alleviate poverty.
At this point, having laid out our argument espousing a certain system of measurement, one may stop us and inquire as to why we should care about studying poverty when our time might be committed to something else. This dilemma might be resolved through the brief explanation of the motivational underpinning of poverty analysis. Understanding poverty is highly connected to maintaining a respect for human dignity, as we might say we have an obligation to act if we have the capability to identify and eventually resolve the issue. Poverty is a social and a moral issue, one that we must strive to understand in the aim of eventually addressing it.